Hello, everybody. It's not the Weird Science Comics DC show. It is the Sunday morning talk. It is. And I do have to start by apologizing because this day, well, it's Easter. So if you do celebrate that, happy Easter. It got all screwy. At one point, this is where I think that people listen or, end up on our live streams will realize that it's not that crazy that old Jimmy boy here forgot that it was Easter on Sunday. Easter Sunday. I thought it was on Tuesday this year. No, actually, I forgot that it was Easter, because I don't really celebrate that many holidays. But I never thought of the idea, wait a minute, old Sully, he lives in South Boston. There is no way that you're not going to be celebrating Easter in South Boston. And so I ended up getting a hold of him last night. And it's funny, I don't know how it comes out or if you're alerted if you do end up, and hopefully people do put on the notifications for the live streams. But the idea that I set it up for 11:15 at one point, right? Hey, 11:15. And then I was like, oh my God, I got to get a hold of Sully. I never did ask him. At the end of the aficionado show yesterday, we were like, hey, yeah, we'll see. And then I thought, wait a minute, is he talking about this week or maybe next week? So I got a hold of him. I said, hey, are you going to be able to do the show? It's Easter. And I'm not going to be a crack in the whip or anything. And I figured he was probably doing something. But then he said, oh, that's fine. And ends up with, okay. And then I ended up having to change the date. So what I'm saying is I went through like the time. I went through like 8 times. At one point, I did have it set for 12:30. Then I had it set for 12. Then I got back to 12:30. Then I went and changed it again for 11:30. And then changed it to 11:15, thinking that I still had it at 11:30. So I was doing a couple things this morning, waiting to go. And then I thought, oh, my God, I got to get down there. And Sully, at one point, I said, at the point of 12:30, Sully said, oh, I can't do it then. And he's doing some stuff later. And so when I changed it, I figured I'll let Sully have a nice Easter. He does not have to. And even when he was saying, well, we could do it quick and then I have to get going. I don't want to have his Easter, one of his big things be, hey, I better go talk about comics with Jim, because Sully's too nice ever to say no. It's the problem. So when I ended up putting the deals and going back, whatever, I figured I'll just come on, because I did say to him, even with us coming, we weren't going to review anything. We were just going to talk some comics and maybe talk Easter or stuff like that. So it's not a big deal. So if Sully, if and when he hears this or sees this, it's not like I pushed him aside. I'm worried now that he's going to think that I made up all this stuff and then push him aside. But then I came down here. I'm like, all right, it's 11:30. I got to get down. And I come and I see Lane and Fearmark. They're talking, and I'm like, oh crap. And then Sully, not knowing, he did say we're not having the show. So hopefully people do show up. It's kind of a weird show to have on a Easter morning, but that doesn't bother me. I ended up finding out, and my wife is here for the week. So me and her did go and get coffee this morning. The problem was we went to get coffee at the local coffee place, the donut shop that's right down our street. And we forgot that every holiday, a religious holiday especially, they close. They're not open. So we walked all the way there, and they weren't open, which always triggers her to scream and yell. And she starts yelling the idea of it's ridiculous that places are closed. I'm like, you wouldn't think it was ridiculous if we worked there and had the day off. And then she's yelling. And then we couldn't find our kids. We were trying to find out what our kids were doing. And then she went to the opposite extreme of they were having this great Easter, and they ditched us, and they didn't tell you, and it wasn't that. It ended up not being that after her getting upset for a while, which she does. And I tried to tell her, and this is my theory in life. I'll give everybody on Easter morning, my theory on life is you get upset about things. Something happens, and you get upset, right? And if you get upset about it, that doesn't change. When you get to the point where it does happen, say you thought, oh my God, my car's broke down. Right? If you're upset about that, when you do find out that indeed it is, you're still going to be upset anyway. So why get upset? Just hope for the best. I don't know. I have a crazy life. I have a miserable life anyway, but I rarely get upset about things ahead of time. But that's also the idea, too, when people say to me, oh, did you see that book was announced? It's, Matt Fraction is September on Batman. Yeah, I could say, okay, that might be cool, whatever. but I'm not going to get that excited about it yet because it's not happening yet, and I don't know what it is. And then it's also the idea when people yell and scream. Now, I probably will talk about some news this morning, and I'll probably get perplexed. But the idea of having videos about things of like this is going to suck, it's just weird. It's kind of wasted time for me. But like I said, I do have some news that we could talk about. I don't know. I thought that this would be more of a nonchalant type of deal. Brandon said hi in the chat. Happy Easter. Happy Easter to you. Brandon Barlord says howdy, kids. Howdy, kids. Also, I do want to apologize. This happened, and it's funny, I'll tell you. And Gray, when I talk with Gray, and it's funny, I should have probably got a hold of Gray. Maybe he's up late. But Gray on Friday, after we got done recording, or one of these days, actually said, you know what, you record all the time and your voice doesn't go. It sounds fine. You're recording 10 times a day. And I thought to myself, it was a big thing. If you've listened to our podcast for a bit, I would lose my voice all the time, like constantly lose my voice. And we'd be at an end of a show, me and Eric, and I could barely talk. And then we'd, get through it. It'd be fine, whatever. I'd go hoarse and whatnot, or mule or donkey. But he said that, and I thought, boy, that doesn't happen in a year. That's crazy. And people realize too, because I always say that I'm coughing a lot too. Maybe I have some problems. Maybe it's because I'm in this basement. But he said it, and I thought, boy, that's true. I haven't really had a sore throat, or I lost my voice in quite some time, and immediately lost my voice. I immediately then did a couple other recordings, and then by Friday night, late, I had no voice. And then I ended up where, if you're like me, when you get up in the morning and you run down to do a podcast, like everybody does, when I went to do the aficionados yesterday, I hadn't really talked out loud. I ended up running downstairs, and so I get on. I was right at the last minute. Get on, and the thing starts, and I start talking. I'm like, holy crap, I don't have a voice. So it did annoy me. But here we are for Easter, and one of the big things this week, obviously, was the Superman Day. Friday was Superman Day, and I'd love to know how many people legit knew about it ahead of time and legit did something, because it almost feels like, I don't know, if you're a Superman fan, maybe you did, right? And Lane, I am all alone. And I mentioned earlier the deal. It's mainly because, like I said, Sully, we had this back and forth of wanting to do it. He was going to do it, but I didn't want to end up making him have to do this with me on Easter. He should spend time doing things that he enjoys. I'm not saying he doesn't enjoy this, but he says, do we get man bunny ears Jim today? Varlord says, not at all. Actually, my wife did get bunny ears the other day, and she got them, and she was all happy about it. And then she showed our youngest son, and he kind of just rolled his eyes, and then she got upset about it. But the Superman Day, and maybe that's what Barlord's talking about as well. The Superman Day, I think it kind of popped up. I didn't know. I got a email from DC, and I've said this in the past. DC hates me. They hate our show. They hate our website. They can't stand us. They have actually gone out of their way to spread legitimately. If I could get in writing some of the things that they've told people, at least what I've been told by the people they've been told, I might be able to go to court against them, because it's bad. It's slanderous, it is. I mean, they hateful stuff. I guess I could just even say it. And there is Yule says he ain't talking Easter. I'm with you, Yule. Screw Easter, right? Maybe I could get in trouble for that. But there's been times where people have reached out, and creators, and say, oh man, do you do interviews? Do you do this? And I'm like, well, not really, but this one. And then eventually they Kyle Higgins did it. He ditched. And I think that when he starts talking to people, they have these weird ideas and end up saying, stuff that we're real haters. I'm talking haters, not just haters. I'm talking we're told that we're homophobic at points from people. And I don't know why. Or we're racist. Things like that have been told to people, and I just don't get it. But when I get an email from DC, I know they're desperate, because they don't like telling me anything. So I got an email, but again, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. Hey, Superman Day on Sunday or Friday. And what it reminds me of, and I have 5 kids. So this is exactly what it reminded me of. Batman Day's a huge thing, right? Superman's like, finally, he's like, well, what about me? I know it's about the movie and stuff like that, but it felt like to me, it's like, oh, we'll have your day too. There, Superman. Here you go. Everybody loves you, the Supermans. And Batman's like, now Batman's pissed because usually the kid who gets all the parties and things like that, then they get jealous and get pissed. And now you wonder where Wonder Woman Day is, which I'm sure they have something along the lines. But Superman Day, it just feels it didn't feel natural to me. It didn't feel like, and somebody may tell me they've been doing this for 15 years. I have no idea. And also, I know they wanted the date, and that corresponds with things, whatever. But a Friday didn't feel right. You should have just had it on like Wednesday or Saturday. They've had it at points, but with the holiday, I don't know. It just felt weird. So this week we did have the Superman special. And when I went to read it, I was kind of excited. And yeah, the Barlord said it's about the upcoming film. And that's why it felt weird. You know what I mean? It felt like it felt like maybe they should have phrased it different, but I guess they'll have it every year. And that's cool. And if you're a Superman fan, it's neat, whatever, but we'll see. But Lane said it's a Summer of Superman, which happy guys, Dan Slott and Mark Waid wanted to give this. And then Brandon says Wonder Woman Day is celebrated at the Space Mall. It is. It's they go to the Space Mall, get a pedicure, and then wonder if it would be a good thing to time travel so Bruce can relive the death of his parents. That'd be awesome. Booster tried doing that in one of the weirdest convoluted stories ever by Tom King. It didn't work. But you get that Superman special. And even then, I think that it was a bit of a misplay. It almost feels like to me with Joe Kelly on The Amazing Spider-Man, where you have Joe Kelly doing the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. So then when you actually get to his new number one, it feels a bit like been there, done that. It feels like, oh, well, that's not as exciting. When you would go through, just say Justine Ireland, say nothing changed with the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, which wasn't great. And you go through that, how many people would be more hyped to say, oh my God, it's a weird way to hype, but the weird deal of, oh my God, if we can get out of this 8 deaths, I can't wait. Joe Kelly has to do better. And I think it would have been more excitement. I think there would have been more play. I'm not saying that people would have loved the number one issue, but it would have given a little dip. And Yule said, where he says Summer of Soup sold out pretty good except 2 pages. And I'm here to say I agree with Yule. Somebody said yesterday, Yule, during the aficionados, that somehow you, like, it almost felt like they saying you actively try to piss me off. And then I get mad at you. I'm like, I don't get mad at you. I love you. And I love when you're on. I actually ask, seriously, not blowing smoke up Yule's ass here. When I end up going on the show, Wes says, can you do the show? And it's usually like, hey, we don't have anybody. Because I told him I don't really love doing it a lot of times. And I have to get up and whatnot. And I'm lazy. But I always say, is Yule going to be on? And sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't. But I do like when you're on because you have that perspective of the, retailer that most people don't understand, and where you go with the idea of what you do like personally, but also you're going to want to push things that sell, obviously. And I like that perspective. And so he said it sold out. Me and Gabe did the review on our Patreon Spotlight. I liked it. And Yule's right. About 2 pages were just not great. And it just kind of swerved in a weird way. I'm assuming I know the pages, but the Mark Waid stuff, and I know that Mark Waid people don't love, whatever. But again, I'll go with Yule too. And Yule said he'll be back. So the idea, Yule would probably go with whether or not he likes Mark Waid or whatever, he has a job to do and he needs to sell comics. And so it's almost like I said, and when you're reviewing things, I don't want to stop reviewing something. And I take it as he's a guy who I work with that I necessarily don't like. I'm not going to hang out after, but when you're doing a job, you have to do it, and then you kind of part ways, and things like that is how I end up doing that. But the idea of that thing, Mark Waid's part, I really liked. I thought it was really, really good. It changed a little bit of thing with Lana and that, which I thought you didn't have to do that, but okay, I get it. But in the meantime, you get a Superboy, Clark Kent Superboy story that was pretty good. And then the whole thing with Validus, that, that's going to be the thing that keeps everything going through that story. But I like that. I'm telling you right now, I liked the Dan Slott story until all of a sudden Superman was lecturing me about global warming in a story that really felt like the idea of, a rift open. The rift opens and Validus is coming through, And then Superman even says, I feel the barometric pressure drop. And it felt like this was immediately as the rift opened. So I thought, okay, that's crazy. And even if it was the idea that they have a superstorm, 3 tornadoes, because the whole play of this, the mechanisms here, is that they wanted Superman to fight Validus with Lois. You need something for the other people to do, the other heroes. So they're fighting 3 tornadoes. I get it. You didn't have to do anything but say, because that rift opened, it caused some anomaly, and these things happen. And in the meantime, you start wondering if John Kent, Pa Kent's knees are like Nostradamus. They're predicting things. Because he did, that's the only thing. And the idea was weird. The idea in this issue where Dan Slott goes with it is the idea that they say the weathermen who are, the meteorologists, and I don't know if you know that. That doesn't mean you do magic. They're scientists in that way. They say there's not going to be a storm. Pa Kent says, my knees hurt. So then when you get the storm, Superman doesn't say, holy crap, why didn't they know this, the science? They end up, then he's yelling that we have to deal with the science. And then Pa Kent says, told you so, science stinks. It was such a weird deal. And yeah, and that's the 2 pages. But besides that, I think you will say it wasn't bad. I liked some of the voices that he had. I thought Pa Kent was great at that. I really wanted the joke of at the end where it does have a storm and then Pa Kent's like, I told you. And they're like, what are you talking about? It was because of that rift. And he's like, was it? And it would have been funny if you framed it that way. I thought it would have been really cool. And then the Joshua Williamson stuff, again, that stuff starts setting up things later. And what I said on our show, on our review, is one of the things is as they start tying things together and try to get this absolute, it's too soon for me. I don't really want to have a book that, even if it's one of those, and they'll do it. Jeff Johns, the classic, when he finishes something, he'll always give you that in the future, and none of it really happens or whatever. But when you're setting things up, I like where they set things up. We've talked about it before. DC kind of got rid of the idea of let's set up events, even Marvel. I mean, events just happen. It's like, boom, and they happen. The one book that might be the main thing might set things up. But it was cool back in the day where you'd have little hints, and you didn't even know they were hints. So I get that. But when you start tying the absolute stuff, I'm like, I'm not even settled in with the absolute universe. And that's fun. That's fun to figure out things and wonder what's going on. And I'm really worried. Which, first, 2 things I'm worried about. I'm worried that they're going to try to connect them too soon. But I'm also worried on the opposite side that they're already planning on doing that. And then they're going to do like Hickman with the Hoxpox. Suddenly, out of nowhere, say to Scott Snyder, hey, we got to extend this. Hey, this is the gravy train. We got to extend this. And then it's going to feel artificial that way. And I don't know if everybody's reading the Ultimate stuff. It's pretty much the most popular stuff over at Marvel. But at this moment, even that feels, when you have that thing where you have to set up this big event, it feels like everything, you're not dealing with big things because you have to wait to the bigger thing. And so you kind of get lost in the shuffle and everything feels like they are, just treading water. And that's not fun, but it shows you. I mean, that Ultimate Spider-Man shows you that if you give fans what they actually want, a bit of a mature Peter, whether it's with MJ family, but it is, they'll go through a lot of water treading to just have that. And again, when I talk to people and I kind of argue about the idea of me wanting more in that Ultimate Spider-Man book, it is that I want to see the kids more. I wanted to see Spider-Man Peter train because that would have been a cool thing to see, an older Spider-Man trained to be Spider-Man because of the time frame and how he wasn't before. And he never really got that. And I said the thing that probably would have done it for me is just every issue I wish had a 2-page cold open where it's Peter stopping some various crime. It doesn't have to be, Mysterio every time or negative, Mr. Negative. Just do things. Have him do some weird stuff that's funny and he fails and things like that. So then when you get to the big point, when Craven gets them and Harry, that he is fully capable and that he could do some things. So that was one of the things that kind of got me. And I'm looking at the what's it called? At the chat. I'm having problems. And yeah, I'm not saying that the Superman special is the greatest, but it's pretty good. And especially if you just want to have something that's kind of like a cool little Superman story. You see Superman being Superman. You get a little lay of the land if you haven't been reading the books of what's kind of going on. But then maybe go off to read the Superman book by Joshua Williamson, which I really, really do like. Me and Yule actually did have a little bit of an argument about that book, if he remembers, that I ended up like with Joshua Williamson. I wanted him to settle with like some of the stories were great. And I think it was the Parasite story that I actually just said, I wish that we got more, and it just kind of stopped. And then you move on. But he does get back to things. And I think Joshua Williamson is a good writer. I just think that maybe sometimes he gets a little bit, over the top, like everything's the shiny things that he's grabbing. He wants more and more and more, but I'd rather have more and more and more than less, less, less. And so I do like his Superman book a lot. It's one of my favorite of the DC books right now. And I did see some questions back here, and I got to go back where the idea of having Marvel's horrible with events now. Secret Empire was the last one I felt was good. Yeah, people get upset about that. The Marvel events, they end up like, they almost like sneak attack you. And then you think, why is something that's 9 months long and has 8 million tie-ins? How is this sneak attacking me? I got a sneak attack. It's that. That's crazy. But yeah, I agree. And I ended up where I really got into Marvel because we were going to start a podcast. I always wanted to read Marvel. I was more of a DC guy. But when we did do it, it was at the, whatever the last one they had the new number ones, like Mark Waid was on Doctor Strange. Yeah, the Donny Cates starting the Venom stuff, like all that's when I jumped on. And then suddenly it was event. And even when I thought, well, I had a Star Wars podcast and I thought, okay, well, at least I got my Star Wars books, right? And oh no, event after event. And they were so proud to say in announcements of, hey, by the way, we're now going to do more events than ever. I was excited. I really was. The War of the Bounty Hunters, but Dark Droids, I was done. And MH Comics Invictus says, I dropped Ultimate Spider-Man on issue 2. I don't have the patience for extremely slow pacing for Marvel. That Ultimate Spider-Man, the only thing that, two arguments you can say is you don't see a lot of Spider-Man. But it's the pacing, and some of the others are weird. And it's a weird play, too, because I don't like Dennis Camp's Ultimates. And I can't say the pacing is bad in that. It's that the idea, like, it just feels like random one-shots of concepts. Hey, here's the concept. Midas bought the White House. Let's do that. Hey, the future Guardians, let's do that. Gamma Island, let's do that. And I get the idea of him doing that book, kind of collecting the team to go, but it feels like almost like a scavenger hunt at times for me. And I just ended up, I was reading it. The last 2 issues I did not read. And I have to tell you, with Comics Invictus, I'm going with the deal. I didn't even read the last, I think, 2, at least the last Ultimate Spider-Man. And that was one of the first books that I would read. And yeah, Barlord said the month-to-month in real time isn't working. And I talked to a bunch of people about this, and I know that the Ultimate X-Men is not everybody's favorite. I really like it for what it is. It's kind of separate. I love Peach Momoko. I think she's a great person as well. So when you read it, though, it really hurts that month deal. Like they said in an interview, it was the interview from the translator. And I do know the guy, and now I forget. But he ended up saying, hey, this is the deal. Peach kind of was asked to do this book. She didn't really know what it was about. She doesn't know who the maker is. And really the part of this, to just tell you how, and this could get people upset, but she's not saying anything different. She's doing what she's doing. But the first time that you ended up having, I wish I could remember the guy, he ended up putting a schnicked in the book because, you have Wolverine. And she used, or actually it was the BAMF, I think. It was for Nightcrawler. And he put it in, and she got she goes and checks what they've done and whatever. And she sees this BAMF, and she's like, I think you've messed up. What is that? He didn't know that. I think the schnick was as well. She didn't know that. So he had to tell her. So what they say is, with her doing it, it's like, it's more of the Marvel method in my mind. She does the art, the story's, a concept, but then he marvels it up. He writes the script out to marvel it up and add those little things in it. But what I'm saying is, she's just doing her story, and it is, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But the problem is you end up having some big moments at the end of issues. And you're like, oh my God, Like you have, this person running into this person, they're about to fight. And then when you get to the next issue, a month has gone by. So everything we just had is like 2, 3 weeks before. And you're on to the next thing and nothing. You never can settle down, it seems, with the story. And when you end up where people are talking about it, and I did talk about people like, man, that month, there are people who don't get that concept, it seems, that they don't understand that a month has gone by, or sometimes they'll play the idea of having, Christmas and then you'll have New Year's. Okay, that part we're going to just go, now we do have to skip a full month to the next one. I think it was a weird play. And again, the weird play then is that during the other 30 days of the month, Peter Parker Spider-Man's training. He's like, and some person, whoever it was, and if they are in the chat right now, I blame them, that it really threw me when they ended up saying to me, hey, I like the dream fight. And real, that's the best thing is in the dream fighting, you ended up continuing that. But then when you're used to this month, you're like, holy crap, how long have they been in there? But this person ended up saying, hey, when I read these, I wonder how boring the other days were that we didn't get to see. And I'm like, oh, you son of a gun. That's what I'm thinking about now. Yeah, but there you go. When you do it by month, even that, here's the thing, month to month, what I think you miss a lot of is actually the character work. Because if you do it month to month, if I was writing it, where they say, hey, listen, you kind of plot it out. Maybe you do it each time. It's that different time frame that left. You can't just go. It's funny because they kind of are, but like you want to do bigger things. You have to have the big things. So some of the little moments like Peter training and, or him going to a daddy-daughter thing. Like if it was just kind of sell your own story, you could have stuff like that. But instead you have to go, and by the time you do something, I think in the Ultimate Spy, all the books, it feels like, oh crap, like where did how did that happen and all this? So it just throws me. It throws me there. And yeah, and you do miss some big events. And they talk about the character work. That's the big problem. I think that's one of the bigger problems with some of these writers. And I think a lot of the writers, especially the ones that come from, say, TV or cartoon, anything that's a visual thing, a lot of times character work is seeing Ryan Reynolds on smiling at you. That really pushes the deal. You fall in love with characters because of the actors, nothing even to do with the script. You can fall in love with an actor just because looks that they give, or that, but with the comics, they kind of lose track of that. They think that these characters can do, like, you almost expect that they think they walk in a room and then everybody goes crazy like they're the Fonz back in Happy Days. Like, it doesn't happen. And you're waiting, and then things, you just never get a feel. And some of the things end up feeling like, very, very fake. I try to think of the deal. I was going to say sterile, but it's not sterile. It just doesn't feel natural. We know we're reading comics, whatnot. But when you actually care, like, I don't think there's any book right now, except maybe I'll give Ultimate Spider-Man credit, because if one of the kids died, I'd be upset. But if you talk about the idea of how little character work happens now and how people don't care, is Spider-Man dying in that 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. He died. That should have been at least a blip on somebody's radar. Somebody would have had, but nobody even reacted. First off, we know that he's not going to be dead. So yeah, but it didn't feel like anything was earned. So why would you care? And there are times where I've read things in the past. One of the things I'll admit, I'm a grown man, and I rarely have a lot of emotions except anger. But when Damian Wayne died, I actually cried. And I did, because even leading up to that, it was everything, not just one writer, but it was the stuff that Grant Morrison did in the Batman and Robin book. But it was also the stuff in the Batman and Robin book by Peter J. Tomasi at that point, and also the Batman Inc. that he died in from Morrison again. But when he was about to go, and the Heretic, if you read the story, Talia had the Heretic, this big mutated deal of Damian, and ends up where Damian's yelling, like, call him off, Mom. Mother, call him off. Don't do this. And he goes, but he has to fight it. And he says to Dick Grayson right before he jumps over this barrier to go fight, I'm telling you, I might get choked up again. It's one of and I love Damian. If you didn't like Damian, you probably thought it was the greatest, but that's still emotions, right? But he's going to leap over, and he's like, hey, by the way, we were the best Batman and Robin. And they're like, I know. And then he jumps and just gets impaled. and he's just dead. And it got me. I could really, if I talk more about it, I could force myself to cry right now because I had a connection to that character. And not just that, but it was also what Nightwing would think, my favorite character, and couldn't do anything about it. And then Talia in that scene ends up, Talia says, like, she steps aside and she has a tear. And one of her guys like, what should we do? Well, like, are you okay? Whatever. And she's like, I just had a second of weakness. Like, let's get going. And has to push that in and move forward. And at one point you see, oh man, Talia does. And then another part, you're like, you bitch. Like, oh my God. And it was such a huge like moment. It was great. Yeah, I love Dick Grayson too. And again, some of these stories now, I get that you want to tell these big stories, but I think that the people who write them, and when you start a new number one or you start a new run, I think you got to do a little more character work to start things out. It might be, I mean, I'm no writist here, and it's probably hard to write character work or things like that for a character that's been around that long. I'm not saying, but one of the things that I think people probably would realize is manga, to me, the real reason that it really works. First off, it's cool. That's one of the things. People neglect the idea that kids think that's cool, and if they think one thing's cool, then the other thing isn't. And it's like, oh, Batman, he's not cool. He's old. That's what my dad likes. I like the manga. But what manga usually does, and Grant's coming back. I'm excited about that. You'll just said in the chat. I hear that he's going to do like an Arkham Asylum like sequel, as they're doing a lot of sequels or whatever. They'll probably like have it in some sort of like graphic that it's Arkham Asylum, but with a 2 in the middle, and it won't make sense. And then I'll end up getting my mind warped when I'm trying to read it. But no, manga. If you read manga, I think you probably, I mean, I'm not the expert, but the idea where you get an oversized first chapter, and a lot of the ones I really love, it's more about the characters than even the story. You kind of get the concept, okay, this is Chainsaw Man's one of those. Denji, through this first whole deal, you really are setting up just how much this guy's been kicked down, and you really lay the foundation of everything that comes from that is, oh, I get it. Denji's dad left him this thing, and he ended up doing this, and all, and Pochita came, and they ended up becoming great friends. That's the character work. And that's a whole oversized chapter of that. So when you get to the end, it's not exactly the idea of, hey, I want to see just the story. You have fallen in love with this character. You actually, like, at being hokey, you've become friends with this guy, and you want to see what happens. So then when the thing happens, you're more invested in it. But I think the opposite deal, when things don't happen, you still like the character. You end up, Ultimate Spider-Man's the perfect example. People will go when it's treading water because they're so desperate to have that Peter and MJ and the family. That's more character than story. I wish it was more developed. But again, in manga, the first, in my mind, because you have the first 2 chapters are usually oversized. The first one is like oversized. Then the other one goes, it's usually like an 80-page down to 40. Then you'll eventually get to the 19. And by the time you get to the 19, that's when the story kicks in. You've pretty much introduced the main characters, whether it's 2 kids who they're the opposites, but they fall in love. But then you have them, boom, then the story starts, and you're so invested in the characters that it really works. And I think it's one of the things that is missing, and might also be missing because editorial is terrible at both the big 2. Because I'll say, so some of the things I'm asking for, they happen in the indie stuff. And the indie stuff, I think one of the plays of indie books, and I say indie, people say, that's not indie, is that you can't wait. You can't waste time. You're begging people to read your book. You got to hit. There's Nick Lowe. He doesn't care about Superman or Spider-Man and things. He just goes with the idea it'll sell. He wants to keep his job, but the idea it'll sell. So, again, if you do great character work, you're going to stick with that character because that doesn't change. The story's up and down to get everybody mad. I will tell you the book that I think is the best example of it because I'm the only one. I love The Super Sons by Peter J. Tomasi. To me, that is 90% character, 10% story. And when I say to people the stories weren't great, I'm not saying reading them wasn't great. It's the idea the stories were second fiddle to Damien and John. And when people want the Super Sons and John being a kid, it's because the character work and how great that could be. Because I'm telling you, Kid Amazo twice in a series, there's problems. And then people don't even remember when they went to Cracklow and ended up all that stuff. It's because the characters are so great. Every issue you like because of that. You're like, oh my God, I don't care where they are. Each issue of Super Sons could have legitimately been, hey, let's play video games, get in a fight about that, go to school. And I would have loved it as well. It's the character work that I thought was really good. And again, Brandon said he thought it was a fun book. I agree. It's because the character work was so great that you just had fun, them bickering. And then when they became friends, that's the big thing. Talk about the big thing that happened in that first series. It's not they stopped bickering and became friends. It's not, oh my God, they defeated Kid Amazo. Oh my God, they took down Cracklow. That's secondary. That's you kind of have to combine them eventually, but unfortunately you couldn't really because it got aged up. John got aged up, and then every story had to take place in this little pocket play. Oh, this is right before that, or this is in that. So that was kind of the problem. And yeah, the Sinister Sons book was not good because, again, they weren't beloved characters and they didn't really get much time to do anything, and the story wasn't great. So you ended up, but that could have been okay. I just think that idea of, hey, I'm Sin's son and Sinestro's my dad. I don't think anybody was really excited about that. And then it kind of ended in a fizzle. It could have combined more with the, what's it called? The Zod book as well, because they kind of had a thing where Lord Zod went off because he was pissed. And then, at this moment, I think that where you're going, I don't know that Lord Zod even knows that his mom's dead yet. So I don't even know if they'll go with that anymore with Joe Casey's book. But you end up where John went from hero to issues focusing to bathtub picks. Again, where the thing with John aging went bad, well, it's when he got aged up. But I'm not one of those that that's come and gone. It's like when I still see people, and if you're one of the people who want it, all the power to you, but people are still yelling for the Suicide Squad Ayer cut. I'm like, really? Like, you keep going with that? Like, we got to getting on. But the idea of John, when he went off and he was in a volcano being, I don't even know what, we always went with the idea that he's being fed like raw pork or something, but it's by a doppelganger of his dad, Ultraman from Earth 3. So he's there on Earth 3. He's out of time. He doesn't realize that, time is going different. So he thinks that all these years his mom and dad are waiting. That leads to him thinking, why isn't my dad saving me? Tom Taylor then pushes at the idea that he was thinking Nightwing was going to save him because, Nightwing always goes to different planets and does things. That's what Nightwing does. But in the meantime, my dad's not coming to save me. And I have an evil version of my dad berating me every day in a volcano. And he came back and they wanted to pretend that nothing went wrong with John, that he wasn't upset. There's no issues. What they should have done immediately, first off, you could have played that it was a doppelganger that came back to Sully. But you were going to go forward. I wanted the idea where John comes back and, oh, no, I'm fine. Now, most people like that, hey, are you okay? Yeah, okay. Like they didn't really want to hear it. But when you end up where he comes back and, yeah, Brandon say, wasn't he up still? The kid mentality just says, yeah, he lived those years. So he's older even that, but he's in a volcano being tortured by a guy who looks like his dad. So he probably has a lot of problems, but I would have liked just the idea where he comes back and he's like, everything's fine. And we start seeing that they're not that fine, that he just doesn't want to upset people. He comes back and realizes, oh my God, my mom and dad, they didn't know. I was gone for a day in their time, but now they see me and they're really upset. I don't want to upset them further. So I'm going to pretend it's okay. But then he starts like getting more and more angry. He's getting angry. Have that crazy, electric blue when they choose nonsense. Have that being some sort of way that you tie in. Have it where he is really, really angry at everybody, not just anybody in particular. And then he decides, I think I'm going to go back to Earth 3 and murder the crime syndicate. I'm going to murder them straight up. I am going to freaking murder them. But that isn't a Superman thing to do. So he says, but when you remember what happens is Tom Taylor tries to get out of that by having other people, you have the crazy injustice Superman, snap necks, and then he hugs it out with him. Very odd. Very, very odd. There should have been not ramifications, but I'll say too again when people talk about John being bisexual and all that stuff, that's where you end up where if you do say something like, "Oh my God, he has some mental issues. He's really going to have to work out some things," and then I think that DC be afraid of. Oh, that's why he's bi. That has nothing to do with anything, and whether or not they should have done that, shouldn't have, whatever. They kind of put themselves in a corner where they had to just basically make John just the. I mean, just think of the idea. If I'm there and John comes back and he's older. I mean, he spent almost a decade and he's going around and smiling all the time and hugging people. I don't punch people anymore. I would think that there's something really wrong with him. Like the idea of this isn't you. And there should have been Damien, who John's like, we could still hang out. And they try to hang out and Damien's like, there's something wrong. What's wrong? What happened? And if he opened up to Damien about everything, I think I would have cried because I love those two characters. And have John say, I miss being a kid. I didn't get a childhood. I'm the Michael Jackson of the DCU. I didn't get a childhood. You could play the old deal and even go with the idea of, the kid stars and kind of play that deal. But it just ended up being just a mess. And then it just, everything like I said about the Ayer cut even, it gets too far removed. And then you're like, well, I guess they're not going to do anything about it. But there was no character work based on that, which there could have been a lot. That was a lot of stuff you could have dealt with and a lot of things that they could have went through, where at one point they even had rumors that John was going to become the villain of a big event. When all that stuff around 5G and things didn't happen, then it was going to be Damien. I heard a bunch of things where people were bouncing back and forth about things. But John coming back and not being well and trying to pretend he is well. And then when that happens, what happens then? Then you get mad at the people who think you're well because you're trying to pretend it and they can't see it would be really good. You could have them really deal with a lot of things, but I don't know that the writers were prepared to do that. These writers aren't great. Nowadays, there's really good ones, but then there's a lot of ones that I'll say they need help. They need editorial to guide them. They need to have some older writers maybe mentor them, and that's what I think. If I was in charge of DC or Marvel, more DC it feels, I would have somebody like, they're not like a CEO, it's an actual other position where you end up being like an ambassador. I remember at one point they did end up having that with the Eagles at one point. I forget who it was. It was, I can't. But what they said, they were the ambassador, but they said, no, I'm the bad ambassador. But they were there to, when the rookies come in, tell her, this is how the Eagle way is, right? You throw batteries at people and, throw snowballs at Santa. You have to have somebody to do that. But no, the big play is I think they need somebody that's just there to be a person where if you're wondering, okay, I don't really know this character, lean on them a bit. How would you write this? Or not even that, just what is this character about? Because I think that from what I've talked to a bunch of people recently and in the past 5-7 years at DC, they're on their own. Even with events, when I get a hold of them, I think we see that now, even with this One World Under Doom. I think it was Joe Casey who said, I didn't even know what this event was. It wasn't going to be an event book. And you can't do that. To tell people what's going on, for crying out loud. But yeah, it's Joseph Wolf said it's like how a lot of people just like to not acknowledge stories that people don't like, but sometimes using those stories can have bits that can make for a really interesting future story. That's the thing. Again, you can do that. You can take something that's like the worst thing ever and not retcon it or anything, but actually say, okay, that was an interesting idea if I do it better or if I show, because a lot of times what you would do, and this is what I would say with John, somehow this became a John podcast. What Joseph Wolf, I think you're saying is everybody hated the idea that John got aged up, right? They can't stand, not everybody, but they hate it. Oh my God, Bendis, this and whatever. Make John mad about it too, because then you're on his side. Then all of a sudden you're like, look, and then all of a sudden he turns back. You're like, oh my God, I understand. Like you could really go with the idea of being pissed off about it and really run with it, really run with the idea and make it so, oh my God, he's yelling about Bendis himself. He hates it. I do like it. If you want to hear the biggest shit talk ever, shit talk in comics, I swear to God, this is one of my favorites, where Bendis legit, and I'm telling you, I've heard people talk to Peter J. Tomasi. He was not happy. He was not happy that he ended up losing the Superman book or the aging of John. And Dan Jurgens wasn't happy about losing Action Comics. It was like, what the hell? We've been putting in the work, and then this guy shows up. So he ended up Bendis at one point. And I hate when people say shit like this, where he did address, oh, people don't like, John aged up. And then says, what? You wanted to just see issue after issue of him playing video games and going to school and doing homework? Yeah, a lot of people, that's what they wanted, because also that would be with Damian and also that. So he said that. He legit ended up saying, listen, what do you want? Playing video games, going to school, and doing homework? And in the one, I think it was the first time that you had after the Super Sons, when you came back, it was one of the digital ones that was also printed. The first page, you have John and Damian sitting there. They're playing video games, and they say something like, hey, what are we doing today? Well, we have video games, then we have to go to school, and then we have to do homework. And I was like, oh, you did it. You did. Take that, Bendis, you jerk. But yeah, and the idea of Jeremy Adams doing bits of Jeffrey Thorne's run, it's also that he ended up, and he did want to take away Heroes in Crisis completely, but made it a deal because he loves Wally, do that. But you have those sort of things, and that's what you can do. Not every story that you're going to go back and use. And in that, too, Joseph, when he says he used bits of Jeffrey Thorne's run, even in the here and now, he grabbed a lot of that Philip Kenny Johnson stuff as well. And I don't really love it. I get bored with Orgrim and stuff like that, but he tried to incorporate. And in Philip Kenny Johnson's deal, and I talked to him about it. Some of the things that Philip Kenny Johnson did when he jumped on Superman in Action before they took him off of Superman was that he was kind of using the Bendis stuff that came before. And I think I said to him, like, why are you using this? Because one of the big things is Bendis messed up and said that Mongol is a Warzone. He's not. And it was like weird. And it was one of those things, like when you don't like somebody like Bendis and he's changing things that he messes up, which he did at Marvel constantly too, they stick out more. Like, how dare you change something and not even know anything? How dare you? But in the meantime, Philip Kenny Johnson, if you read the beginning of his books, he really made sure to nail down, like it almost felt like it was forced, nail down the idea that Mongol's a Warzone. And he said he was just giving respect to the thing and making it, now it's the thing and whatever. But he didn't have to do that. But he did. He's respecting what came before. And again, I know that me and Dylan on the Aficionados will go back and forth about Philip Kenny Johnson. I do really like Philip Kenny Johnson. I think he's a good guy. But I also think he's a really good writer. But again, I think that sometimes he needs to be pulled back a little with the lore. I think that a lot of his books, a lot of people, and I'm not talking big fans, people who are you need casuals as well. You need people who are just enjoying a story. And I think he loses a lot of those people. And then it was funny because I'm on the Aficionados yesterday, and Dylan said he's really excited about the omnibus that they're coming out for Philip Kenny Johnson's War World. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's. And then he said, well, it's going to be awesome because there's extra bonus and he has tons of lore and maps and things. And I thought, you know what? Like, I was actually going to moan and say some stupid comment and be a jerk like I am. But I actually thought, no. That's actually the best way to do it. I mean, he seems like, and he is, when he did that Last God, I guess it's like Spellfire Chronicle or something like now, Spirefell. You could tell he's like a D&D nerd. He's a nerd like that. He's a fantasy fiction type, when you end up where I love the books. Anytime I got a fantasy book, if it didn't have a map, I was so upset. So I get it. And I love D&D, all that. So he loves to do that. But maybe it is the idea, listen, we're going to give you an omnibus down the line. Keep some of that lore. Like, yeah, we need some. Keep that for that, because the people who are going to get the omnibus, they're going to eat it up because that's what they love. They obviously loved everything that they got and want more, but you do kind of lose some of the casual deals. Yeah, and that's, you end up where JK says that agree on JK. Sometimes his characterization doesn't always make sense. It's true. I like what he's doing on the Batman and Robin book. I still say, even though last issue I did like, people were yelling that it should get an Eisner. I don't know about that. But I also think there's things going on behind the scenes that they're telling him to draw things out until September. But in the meantime, I do think that he writes a pretty good Damien and ends up where I do. I still think that Batman and Robin is still my favorite book with this all in stuff. But boy, I'll tell you, one of the book that surprised me was that Green Lantern Corps. I really like that. I thought that it was more going to be a Morgan Hampton book, and if it is, I give him all the kudos. I didn't like his Cyborg book at all, but boy, I like that book a lot. Um, but yeah, Phil Kenny Johnson. And again, you want to go through an idea of character work like manga, and in the book, there's kind of manga is the Robin, the solo deal by Joshua Williamson, where Damien goes off and fights in that tournament. Please, that tournament was nothing. That tournament, the background story, whatever, wasn't what was good about it. What was good about that book were the characters, and I'm talking Damien Flatline, 3XL, who nobody remembers, even Connor in that. That was the draw. It was the draw. Joshua Williamson writes Damien great, writes him superb. But don't tell me even that Batman and Robin book before Philip Kennedy Johnson was really hitting with things that people were laughing and rolling their eyes about. Shush, talking about Zaz's maybe son, the goalie, and Mistress Harsh, who suddenly shows up and it's pretty much telegraphed. You knew it was her, and then they play this deal with the principal stuff. Nothing was really that great about that, but the characters were great. They were so great, and that's what people remember. If you say, most of the people, if I would say right now, tell me why you liked, specific, tell me why you liked Robin. A lot of people would immediately say, well, I love Flatline. Flatline was so cool, and it's hard to introduce new characters. James Tynion did it by just, it was pretty much, we're going to have a land war against China. You end up where there's 1 trillion characters coming at you. Oh my God. And then 3 hit and you're like, man, that was awesome. He had so many. Oh my goodness. What was that? Miracle Molly. What's she doing now? Probably hanging out. I liked Miracle Molly, but you had so many of them, and yet Joshua Williamson, again, he kind of did the Tynion deal in that story where he introduced tons of stuff. And then Flatline, boy, what a great character. And then when he continued in the Batman and Robin series, kind of didn't ruin her. I still really like her, but saying that her sister was involved now and having this and that, it didn't make sense. And it shouldn't have done that. But having Ghost Ra's al Ghul, talking to her crazy. Yeah, Connor was great, but it says it was me. He seemed younger, and that's, him coming back. And I think it was also the art style that did it. But even when I did argue with somebody about the tournament, I'm like, you couldn't sit there and give me the play-by-play of that tournament. It's, I'm not thinking of it back in like, oh man, that was as good as the 96 NBA playoffs. Right? You just end up where most people forget that Connor won, and then it got mixed up with the Lazarus Reign stuff and all that. But yeah, they have I wish they don't, JK says, I wish they don't young traveling anti-heroes run with those characters. And yeah. I ended up where at one point, me and Eric, when we were doing the podcast together, we were really talking about how great it would be as a Damien thinking that he's going to set up like a new Teen Titans and get them and see how that worked out. Or you do have, in a lot of these stories, you do have a team of, characters that are sons, daughters of heroes and villains kind of coming together would be really, really cool. And again, talk about character work too, that, who was it? Was it Adam Glass? The Teen Titans, where you ended up having, now I can't even remember the characters, but you had a bunch of characters, and I remember my favorite that everybody hated at first, but it was all about characters. And yeah, done a thing. They should have done a young traveling heroes deal, and they should have ended up doing all of those. And I like younger characters, so I'd be all for it. But yeah, so that all started with the Superman Day and the Summer of Superman special. But if you haven't read the Summer of Superman special and you think the idea, oh, I heard Dan Slott's story was awful. First off, it wasn't awful. It just had a weird swerve. I'm still looking forward to seeing what he's doing in that book when it comes out, his solo book that he's doing. But that didn't get me real excited for it. I still want to see, and I think that this is just like a blip, and it should have been maybe, kind of condensed and maybe being offered as one of the handouts at Superman Day at comic shops. But they make it oversized. They make it, more money. I didn't even check because I do have the Ultra app, which that's another story that I told before. But I got the Ultra app real cheap. There was some crazy deal where I'm telling you, it was like $39 for a year. And every day of that year, I thought, I got to get online and cancel it. I read through my tablet, and you can't do it there, I guess. So I had to go through. And then I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. And then suddenly I got charged like $140 and flipped out. But I have it still, but I don't really check it out. I would hope it would be one of those where I would think, I don't think they did, but I could check. But it would be one that they give out because they do have those free ones on, Wednesdays. And that would be one that would have been better served as that too. And Brandon said that he said, I don't think the book was that bad. In the hot or not West was too harsh. Yeah. And he goes a little over it. But again, I think that sometimes that's kind of like, I don't know, let's play it up and whatnot. But yeah, it just, if you didn't like that Dan Slott couple pages, there was still some cool things. I think the biggest play was it really didn't do that much, but it was cool for a Superman Day for me to say, look, Superman's cool. And look, Lana's getting married and Superman's there and he loves Lois and all that, though. I love Lana. I love Lana so much. And I hate it, but I love it when she'll always bring up the like, yeah, and some of us were the insect queen. I'm like, oh man, I want to see more of that. So it was pretty cool. And it would have been funny too, because they do end up saying, hey, when these things happen, these weddings, things really happen and weird with us. And they end up, well, it's not good because the fifth dimension, it's in this thing. And I'm like, it kind of goes by the last time. It's not just the play out that calendar deal. It was the last time they saw him. But I actually would have loved where all of a sudden you get Turtle Jimmy. Jimmy didn't do much in that issue at all. I can't remember. I guess he was there. Jimmy's the worst in that, not the worst because I love Jimmy, but Jimmy's the one where that he was just, they wanted to get a free wedding photographer. And so he's there doing that. But yeah. JK or Joseph Wolf says, I hope Slott's book's good. I've been loving Superman stuff right now. And when people do say about, oh my God, yeah, you're going to end up having nonsense and, it's going to be bad. I do hope for the books to be good because we don't have enough good books. And I want to have the idea where I can say to people, and I think everybody here would agree, man, you hate Jason Aaron. You got to read that Batman Offworld. It's awesome. No way. Jason Aaron sucks. And no. You got to read it. It's really good. And then those people came back to me if they did get, oh my God, it's so good. Why can't Jason Aaron write like this all the time? And then why did that last issue get delayed and then thump like that? That was the worst. But again, you end up where Dan Slott comes over here. You end up, maybe he'll get some mojo going. Maybe he'll be excited. Maybe the problem is that he shoehorned himself into Spider-Man stuff that he has. And he doesn't have the spark or, it doesn't excite him. Writing Superman would. And then they kind of end up where, if I was an editor, I'd say, okay, I get what you want to do with this. But and if you're trying to trigger people, why? Because they're going to be keeping an eye on you in this story. The first thing you're going to be coming back with Superman here, they're going to keep an eye on you and they're going to be looking for something to get mad at. They're going to find something to get mad at. Make it something that when somebody says, oh, I didn't like this, somebody looks at him and goes, you're ridiculous. You just don't like Dan Slott. This was so over the top that it fueled the fire. And people, now it's the worst, and this book coming out, and I'm never going to buy it. And it just sucks. And Dungeon Crawler Carl said, I'm going to miss Spider-Boy. Spider-Boy's people love the Ultimate Spider-Man. My favorite book at Marvel is Spider-Boy. It's my favorite book. And again, he did a really good job of creating a character that people were really upset that was going to become, they're going to elevate Spider-Boy like Miss Marvel. They're going to make him this and that. He's going to be and made a character that really was kind of broken and was just a kid but didn't understand things and really acted like a kid who just became a hero and didn't really understand what that meant. and then also got lost in time, and people forgot and dealt with a lot of things like that. And I thought the character is great in that book. I don't want him showing up in everything, but that in that book, great. I mean, like that, I thought was a similar character like Gabby, who I really love, but has not been treated well by other writers, and they kind of lose track. That's how Damien was for years. Damien was just, if he showed up in a book, he was a pain in the ass, bitch, jerk. He hated everyone. He'd always be, and eventually, if you don't get the character work of why he's that, then he's just that. I mean, if I come on and I talk, and again, sometimes that's why I think I talk about, I'm doing my own character work here, where I tell you stories about stuff, and I get yelled at by everybody in my life of why would you talk about all these things that happen and things, and I think it's funny, but I also think that then if I come on and I get angry or whatever, you're like, oh my God, I wonder what happened to him. It was probably this or this happened again or whatever. And when Damien doesn't have character work, all he is on the surface level. Guy Gardner, same thing. Tom King just wants to make Guy Gardner a handsy abuser. He isn't. He is a guy who is kind of, got some, to me, has layers. And the layers are that he had a bad life, and he ended up thinking that he always has to prove himself in a almost like a toxic way. The idea of his dad and things like that he has to go over the top because all he wants is acceptance. But being somebody like that, you're never going to get it. You never get it, because if you get to the next level, you think or they don't mean it. It's all those things going through his head. And then when he becomes a hero, and I'm not saying becomes, but in moments where you think, oh my God, who's going to save the day? And then you see Guy willing to sacrifice everything, then you get it. I say one of my favorite Guy things is when he was fighting Doomsday in the Death of Superman deal, and they were getting the shit kicked out of him. And Guy ended up where he could not see. Both of his eyes were swollen shut. He couldn't see, and he yelled, I think maybe to Bloodwind or whoever it was there, point me to where this son of a bitch is, because I'm going to, he just said, I can't see him. Point me to where the direction, and I'm fighting this thing. And he did, and that was crazy. And again, you could say at the end that he did it because he wanted to be, praised or whatever. In that moment, no, he knew that he had to be a hero. And you see that characters that he's bad-mouthed or he has a problem. He doesn't really have a problem with them. It's just that guy who's always doing shit like that. Every team, everything has that sort of guy. But when things come down to it, you kind of need that kind of guy. And then J.K. says, Brandon said, Spider-Boy was fun. He was shaking people down for money and food. That was the point where I said when we were talking of it on the podcast, like, he didn't get it. Where afterwards he's like, yeah, I saved you. Here's your purse. And yeah, that'll be $10. And the lady's like, and the lady was like, oh, okay. And then I think it was Spider-Man who saw it. You can't do that. And he's like, what? Like, how am I going to make money? He wanted all that money and stuff. So that was really fun. And you end up where Teen, Jaime, and Damien would be good. I like Adam's pitch with the Flash kids, Damien and Steph as a group mom. Steph needs to be more than Cass is extra. I get that. What I really like is Maxine. And I really was liking that you had Maxine, Animal Man's daughter, who is actually the avatar of the Red, just in waiting and when Buddy's done. And again, there's another book that Jeff Lemire, Animal Man, had so much character work in it that at the end, spoiler alert from 10 years ago, and that's the thing. You read an Animal Man book and somebody in the family, if not the whole family's dying, but Cliff died and it was devastating. I still sit here and I'm like, when we saw Jeremy Adams and there was, the Baker family, I'm like, please tell me that Cliff is involved. Please tell me that Cliff's not in this scene because he's off at the arcade like the redhead kid from Terminator 2, because that's kind of how he looks and make it that he's too cool for school. And no, I want Cliff back. And that's the other thing too. Me and Gray do a Grant Morrison podcast on our Patreon. We do it, every other week because now we mix it in with the Usagi Yojimbo book. Another book that I'll say is a lot of character work, even at the very beginning. But when you have Grant Morrison, I never liked Grant Morrison because all I could focus on is the wacky shit he'd do. And I'm not a smart guy. I'm not a handsome fella. So when you get that, I was always thrown back and, I didn't really give a lot of things. And it was like, okay, you got to read this. And I'd read one arc and okay, I'm in and out. But reading stuff and going, again, really good character work and characters that aren't necessarily the greatest of all time and yelling, "Oh my God, I'm here to save people." That Invisibles book, where you have Dane slash Jack Frost, if you read that, he's a piece of shit, but he's our piece of shit. And you see the gradual bit where he's lashing out. You know why he is. His family life, his mom, all this. But then he's on a team. He's not going to accept it. And then suddenly he is becoming friends, and you see him against even his will becoming friends with people, and they really like him as well. So I thought it was really, really cool. And yeah, you end up where Flatline. Flatline, again, I love the idea where you get a really cool design. Yara Floor, I thought, oh my God, and a lot of people thought that design's great, and then went too far with it before the character came out. So the character ended up being, it kind of got elevated before there was a character, and that's a problem. Again, I think all of it does seem to go back to character for me. And yeah, but when you get the combo of a great character design and then a really good character, it's solid gold. It's great. And Flatline is great. I want to see more Flatline. I want to see Flatline and Damien. I want to see, like you said, even with Maxine and Jay and Irie, I would love that. They would be great. And the best thing, if they did have, where Jeremy Adams talking about that, if you did have Steph there, the problem is I think that Irie would kind of, I think she would get upset because I think that she would want to kind of be that mother. Not that she's Steph or older or whatever, but that's kind of the role that she always fills with her brother, and they may have some things going on there. But also, you know what else happens, I think, a lot with these team books is that where's the idea? Where is the JLI book? Where when you end up, and I'm talking Giffen and Morrison, where is it where the team gets assembled, guy shows up earlier and he's like, there's no way I'm not there. And they fight constantly at the beginning. Almost every other team now is just, hey, we're the greatest. You're awesome. Oh my God, you're great. I'm so glad. Oh, you're the best. And I think we miss out on some of that. Again, you can't really do that a lot with the Justice League. They've been around too long. If they haven't worked it out yet, they won't. But I do like when you end up seeing Batman being irritated by Hal Jordan and them not really getting along as well, but then, all that stuff as well. But you don't have a lot of that. And yeah, a lot of people didn't really enjoy Grant Morrison's Batman run. J.K. said didn't enjoy Morrison's Batman run until I read it all in order. Now I really love it and reread it often. And I do think, this is a pretentious fan of Grant Morrison of, well, you have to read it more than once. I do, because I don't know what the hell's going on. But going through things, yeah, that's why I say, the better in trade, I usually just read and review things as they come out. So I don't really have that perspective a lot of times. But things going back, I think it is true. And if you don't like Grant Morrison and whatever, I think you'd still love the Animal Man run. His Animal Man run is great. It's so good. And it's one of those where when we do podcasts, there are some podcasts. I did a podcast where it was Detective Comics before Batman. So there is a set ending when we get to that 26, whatever, then okay, the next issue. I think I might have done the next one, but here we are, Batman's, that's the end. It ended. And I was sad when it ended. I'm like, oh man, when we finish that Animal Man deal, I'm going to be really sad because I am really, really enjoying it. But then me and Gray, let's call him Grant. Me and Gray are also doing Doom Patrol, Invisibles. We kind of go through those things. So we still have stuff to do, but the Animal Man stuff is so good. I love it. And let me look at the chat again. Yeah, and Dungeon Girl Carl said before about the idea of Supergirl or Spider-Girl, hoping Spider-Girl's interesting. I do too. I really do. And yeah, and JK said, agreed on Damien. They separate Damien from the character history. Damien's arrogance because he was Prince tends to be forgotten. Tomasi handled that story element great. He did. I'm telling you, that silent issue that he did after Damien died, oh my God, it got me. When I think it was in that where Bruce is thinking back, and it's where Damien, like a little baby, had the cape and cowl on, and oh, it's so good. But yeah, that's the play. And Maxine was great, and I would like Irie Flatline personality clash. It would be great. It'd be awesome. So yeah, and I didn't even think of that with Irie with Flatline, but I think Maxine would be cool in there and hanging out with Jay. Oh, it'd be awesome. Jay's there in that boiler room without his shirt on. in the school that was never really explained well, except the homunculi were there. But I'm like, why was he half naked in a school in the boiler room? Freddy Krueger's going to get him, Freddy Cougar. Yeah, that silent issue was so good. It was, I think I brought it up this week or last week on The Aficionados as one of my favorites. But yeah, you have the race deal and stuff. And yeah, this Animal Man, yeah, the Grant Morrison Animal Man run is great. And it's weird because it's not that long, so you can really read it. But the things that are set up, and I love the idea that things are set up in a way that at first you just think Grant is insane. You're like, what is this? Like, you have just one panel of a crazy unicorn with rainbow. You're like, what? And then by the end, when you get like, holy crap, it made sense. Holy moly. And at the moment, we're like 3 issues from it ending. At this moment, it's basically Psycho Pirate losing his complete mind, all of the continuity bleeding in through him into Arkham Asylum. That's changing because of all the timelines and things like that, and all those characters that are coming back not understanding why they were gone from Crisis on Infinite Earths, and playing that whole play is so cool. And then Grant adding things to it. And he even had Binky from back in the day, who's just there while you have Buddy time traveling. Again, one of the best done things of death of a family, kind of funny, but having that and the trying to fix it and then coming to the realization that you can't. And there's a point where Buddy goes back in time and he wants to warn his family. But I'm telling you, the Time Lords ended up screwing him a bit, and he got kind of a wonky time traveling deal. And they kind of, I think they knew it. But when he goes back, he can't really pull his point, but it ties into everything. We saw him before in the series, and now we see what was happening. But at one point in an issue where time travel to save a family, and he looks in the window and he sees himself playing like Monopoly with his kids and wife, and says, that's not my family, that's his family, and I can't do anything about it. That's no longer my family, it's his, and I got to get out of here. It was heartbreaking. And it really did put you in the position of, like, what would you do to save your family? And then what would you do if you realize you can't? And you could almost feel like Buddy's heart, it broke 5 times that day. You could almost, even with the art, and I think it was Chaz Trog, you could see him deflate. The idea that he's just deflated. And then he just kind of walks around. He just wants to see his family. You know, he wants to go see Cliff for one last time. And then Maxine kind of sees him, but doesn't. It was just so heartbreaking. It was really, really good, really good. And I'm setting myself up for the next 3 issues of. I know it's just going to be very upsetting when it ends. But yeah, so I was going to talk a bit more news, but we kind of got off track and things like that we do. But one of the things I was going to ask everybody, y'all rating for that Gotham City Sirens Part 2, are you? I talked about that on our podcast. That was our DC news this week. And again, I said at the very beginning, and I meant it by this, who asked for this? I hate to pish-posh something that is, not out yet, but boy, I read that first one. We reviewed every issue, read and reviewed every single issue of that first series, and it was awful. It was awful in a way that it just, I think that was the book at one point where I did say, it's like looking into the mind of just somebody who's just, I don't know. I don't want to say insane. I don't want to be hateful or whatever, but it really, really felt like you were looking into the mind of somebody who just does not have a grip on some things and thinks everything that they're saying and writing is solid gold. It was like you end up where you set up a story and it is happening on the outskirts of Gotham at the Dude Ranch Old West. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I actually said during the news segment, I do believe Dungeon Crawler Carl said that it was, I think it's all covers. It's all covers. It's the cheesecake covers that you can get out of that. They're great and people will buy that. But in the end, I mean, that's the bottom line. If it sells, it sells. Just keep coming out each month. Hey, by the way, here's another Gotham City Sirens, pin-up book, and have that. But yeah, with that, I'm looking at the chat there, and I could see that being a misstep for DC. Why can't DC do a good female character run that isn't demeaning to women? And what's weird about it, and that's what Tom King comes to mind in that, where if you ask Tom King, I think he thinks he's doing that. I think that he thinks that his Wonder Woman book, because you see it in the books, and people have different ideas, but the idea that Tom King seems to think a good woman, a strong woman, means you have to punch people, but then say no, thank you, not being nice. Almost, and when you have that as Wonder Woman's catchphrase, no, thank you, it feels very dismissive to me. It feels like it's like I'm above this, so no thank like that. It feels like somebody when you meet somebody and they're polite, but you know they're being polite in a weird way, and I don't like it. That's why I'm never polite. Now it just you don't feel the somebody who says oh thank you. It doesn't feel genuine, and it feels like they're doing it because they're forced to. And when she says it just feels demeaning to me. And what Tom King thinks a strong woman is, and it's Catwoman, it's Wonder Woman, it's all the women. Every book it seems is the idea that you have to be a bitch. And I hate to say that, but that's what he thinks. A strong woman isn't some. And with Wonder Woman, I said this wherever I said it, one of the streams we did or whatever after maybe our things are running together, but after our Absolute show, the person who gets it out of nowhere, which people say, "Oh my God," is Kelly Thompson. She gets the idea of somebody who's good and strong also means that they love people and they're compassionate. I mean, to me, it's more strong to be compassionate for somebody that hates you than to actually punch him in the face. But then you could go, too far with things. But I think Kelly Thompson showing how Wonder Woman's strong as a little girl because when monsters come to attack her, she treats them with love and care, and they fall in love with her and now protect her. She's not doing it because she's trying to finagle them. She's being herself. And actually, being yourself is probably the strongest thing you could do, kids. I'm turning my chair around now. My hat just went backwards. I'm talking to the kids. It is one of those, to maintain who you are is very strong. It's not that strong to go into something. I'll tell you, even on YouTube, I don't think that it's like real strong to just yell and scream about things. I think it's stronger to talk about how they can get better and how you can end up making things, as we're talking about all today, making things better out of some things that weren't the greatest. And Wonder Woman having in that Absolute Wonder Woman and seeing that Wonder Woman is such a good character that she made hell a nice place to be. That's what she did. And they did it through the Hayden Sherman art more in that first issue where each panel that you saw, oh my God, look, there's a rug there. Like Cersei is there and she doesn't want to be there. She hates Wonder Woman. I don't want to be a mom. Oh, this. And seriously, also going with the idea that that's a strong character as well, out of nowhere, doing work with her where she is. And really, to me, the idea for that whole deal would have been, hey, the gods want to get rid of Wonder Woman, but somehow they can't kill her themselves. Something with this, I don't think it's just the idea it's a little kid. I think this prophecy, or we do that, whatever. Give her to Cersei. She'll die. Cersei's not going to take care of her. Cersei will probably kill herself, and then no fuss, no muss. We're not to blame. It's like the idea where Batman will push a guy off a roof. He doesn't kill people. Gravity killed the guy. So you end up where, Cersei, we found out Cersei just, pretty much just neglected her, died. But what happened was, all of a sudden, in a cave where Cersei doesn't want to be there, now there's a rug. Oh my God. It's like, well, I better put a rug here because, Diana, she might crawl over there. And next thing you know, you got some candles in there. Next thing you know, you have a bureau and now you have a mirror. And all that was because Cersei started, becoming a mother to Diana because Diana's so great. And the monsters that were sent to kill her are now her plushie toys. And then even when you see her being told through Cersei, you got to do this lesson, you got to do this, you see that she doesn't quite want to do bad things, but she's learning her deal and actually gets almost like the best of both worlds and goes forward. I thought it was great. I thought it was really, really cool. And it surprised me because Kelly Thompson, who I like more than a lot of other people, the DC stuff, that Birds of Prey book, I don't like at all. I think it's bad. But again, it's one of those things where Tom King, some other writers too, they just don't get it. And I'm not going to say that it's because he's an idiot. I think it's his upbringing. I think his mom was an executive at WB. His dad seemed to have left him at some point, so he really admired his mom. And I think that she was probably, I'm not going to say that she's a straight up whatever. I think that she was probably a very strong woman, but she was very assertive. She probably got her way and did it in a way that, in Tom King's mind, it was that strong women have to yell and scream, not probably realizing everything that his mom, and he probably realizes now, but what his mom was up against, being an executive like that at a time where everybody in the boardroom were probably, all the rest of them were men, and was probably dismissed at points. So I think that he is, and a lot of people go with the idea that Tom King must hate his mom or he deals with mom and issues. I don't think that's the case. I think that he loves his mom more than anything, and that's how he sees her, and sees and almost goes with the idea my mom had to fight for everything, and just takes it to a level that he thinks that, now, I'm not saying he's wrong, just the level of that's what a strong woman has to do. And because I do think that a lot of times, if you do read between the lines, a lot of the stuff is he definitely was very, it seems like a lot of us upset. And I would have been, my dad and me didn't get along, but if my dad left me, I would have been devastated because I would have thought he left me because of me. And I think Tom King does go through some things. And really, if you want to go down to it, I'll start getting out my, I should like pan over now and I'll show you my psychology degrees and my master's degree and whatever. But I think that what Tom King is a guy who's desperate for acceptance. He is desperate. He is somebody who needs praise constantly. Not saying that's a bet. He needs to have somebody there because there wasn't that, and he needs people to tell him how great he is. And you could see when he tweets things or whatever, and people do love him. So it's great. He gets what he needs from that. So, and his fans are very loyal. And I think it does upset him a lot if somebody says something bad. I actually have had people talk to him and just mention, I mention this a lot, but mention at conventions, oh man, I listen to Weird Science. And he legit points me out. Doesn't say, oh, those guys. He says, why does Jim hate me? And I think that he probably gets past that, not just me, but I think it does bother him. And I think it probably at points he's there by himself looking out a window at the rain, but I do think he gets upset and wants to please everyone, but does it in a weird way. He has a certain way of writing. But if you like it, it's great, I guess. But he said he needs to complete the pregnant Amazon on the run story. Well, it does end with Diana's death, but yeah, it's weird. He did, and I'm talking to Jared on our podcast about the Wonder Woman stuff. This week was on our Patreon Spotlight, and when we were talking about it, the idea where Tom King legit in an interview said, I read a lot of Wonder Woman. I really like the character, but she's like second fiddle a lot in her own book. And I've been saying this. Mariko Tamaki's run, Clunrad's, and everything in between. Everything since Rucka was doing really good stuff at the beginning of Rebirth. And he was doing those back and forth, year one and then the present. And then after a year said, wait a minute, I didn't know that this was going to be twice a month. And then he quit. And other things involved as well, and some things behind the scenes. But the idea where it was really, really good, but he just didn't have time for the work or whatever. But since then, it's been struggling. And it had been struggling where over and over in these books we're reviewing on the podcast, and I constantly say that Wonder Woman feels like she is sleepwalking through her own book. She's being yanked around, and she doesn't have anything herself. She's not, pushing the book forward. And Tom King, he realized that too. He said, Wonder Woman always is in the backyard, backyard. She's in the backyard with the milkshakes. She is always backseat, everything. And then he did the same thing. He said he wasn't gonna. And I think that the book is so primed to just have a run where it's fun. You can show Diana's compassion. And Tom King tries to do it, but in the middle of a Sovereign story, you can't say, oh, well, Wonder Woman goes off to the space mall. The Cancer Kid one, I actually thought the play with that was okay because while Sovereign was leading up to war on the Amazons, not just Wonder Woman, and that kind of disappeared, but the idea of just Wonder Woman, and she knows that she has to but he didn't play it well. She knows that she has to prepare for war, but one kid needed her at that moment, and she put aside the idea that I may die because of this war. But this kid needs me. And I thought it could have been framed a little better in that vein, which would have been kind of cool. But Space Mall was ridiculous, and really, you ended up having Sovereign as the villain in a deal where not a very good villain. It's a good concept. Oh man, that's conspiracy theory stuff. That's kind of neat. But in the meantime, the guy was like letting Diana go to Space Mall. You didn't see what he's doing, and really just sat around and had that narration that he already been defeated. All this, but at the end, the big twist is, yeah, he was defeated, but Wonder Woman died. But that wasn't a great twist. And I did call it right away that Tom King would at least show that you'd have a death of Diana. And yeah, J.K. says more interested in the writing Trinity. And I think that was a misplay too. You had Trinity in the backups. I thought she was cute as a button and then got annoying. It just ended up like, okay, we're not, and now you announce a book. And I'll tell you, I hated as Damien. I hated as Damien so much. I'll go with the one bit. I love Damien to say, and remember, in Superman recently, they pretty much put, Doomsday in the Black Mercy, where we have to contain him. So we're going to give him the deal where he's just thinking that he's killing Superman over and over again. This is the greatest, right? You end up in that backup where they had the Black Mercy and the Trinity story, where Tom King basically said it doesn't affect Damien because he has no dreams. He doesn't have dreams. Now, if you said to me that it's because he's all in the here and now, you just said that he is an empty psychopath, that he has no empathy. He took Damien in the worst direction ever of saying he has no hopes and dreams. But here's the thing. Even if you think of anybody would have, even the worst person in the world has dreams. They're just effed up. They're just their dreams for him. But the idea that Damien, where you could have had him in a Black Mercy, how about a Black Mercy where Damien actually thinks that he's just a kid in school and doesn't have to worry about shit? That'd be pretty cool, right? That'd be pretty neat. How about a dream like you would think the dream would be that he's Batman and everybody would accept him. But that's what I think Philip Kenny Johnson's doing right now in Batman and Robin, showing that Damien at this point realizes, wait a second, I'm missing out on things and whatnot. But yeah, and Trinity, JK says Trinity was cute for the backup, but the character isn't developed enough. That's the problem. And also keep her as a young kid in those backups. It was fun. And then go from there. But they were all over. And at points, I hate to say it about a young lady, but again, Tom King thought that a bitch was a strong character. And it just didn't work very well for me. But I'll check out the book. I just don't trust Tom King. I'll ask everybody. You end up where you have the whole play of, hey, listen, there's going to be a Trinity book. And out of nowhere, they're like, by the way, Peter J. Tomasi's going to write it. I think everybody would be excited about it because you trust him to do that. And okay. Now, some people might roll their eyes. What does he keep trying to get the Super Sons magic? But there's magic. Do that. But when you know it's Tom King, it's like, who's going to die? Who's going to be out of character? And also he does tend to do what a lot of people hate nowadays. He to make a character good, he thinks you have to make somebody less. Like a supporting character has to be less. He doesn't have real great character work, and he wants to get emotions, so he usually kills a kid. He has something really bad happen, and that's how it pushes forward. But he says, and I did see, Lane said, so Jim, did you review the solicits for July? For DC Marvel, I did not. I did not yet, and I'll have to check out all the things. Again, that ends up, when I end up, and people, I'm sure there's some people here who have listened to me do the solicits. I get so riled up at points, and I go through all of them, and it takes me, like, for Marvel and DC, they're both like 2.5 hour podcasts, and then to put it up here, because when I do it, I should just do it live. And just do it. But again, you see that the system I have and whatnot with that, it'd be really tough, like with all the pictures. I feel like I have to put all the pictures. So you're talking about a thing that usually would take me like 2 solid days to go through. But if people would enjoy maybe a live stream, maybe one Sunday, like, in the future, maybe sometime quick. But if it would be just, me talking about them and everybody talking about it and not really having to do with the visual aspect of it to make it fancy. But I could try. I could even go through, like, as I'm going through, you could see me scrolling through them or something like that. Um, but yeah, I'm looking at the stuff too, and I forgive me if I missed some questions or whatnot. I don't know. We're just having a Easter gathering. Says I see Damien as J.K. the most hopeful of Robins. He has been in the depths of hell. I agree. That's why again, what I want to have, and we were talking about books or whatever. I really want to see more of the team up with Cass and Damien. They would completely understand each other. And I think Damien would be like, Cass is the greatest. And they have, obviously cross paths, but not really anything of, full. And if they do end up having more of the DC versus Marvel, I really wouldn't mind Gabby and Damien. I say fighting, but I think that they would fight and realize that they're both kind of cool and just say, screw all these old people and let's go. I think that that would be really cool too. This backwards that deal. Dungeon crawler Carl. Yeah. JK says, I can't see Damien just wanting to be a doctor. His engineering skills and intelligence can serve a broader range. Plus, he is a born and bred warrior. I get that. I would think that it's weird because every time you do think what Damien would want, there's always going to be something that isn't quite Damien in it. Like, man, he'd be good in the military, but boy, he wouldn't think that he could take orders, and he would think but I do think that he would be somebody who would really love to train people. I think that him and Cass together on that as well, like something like that. But he wants to be Batman. But I think he wants to be a better Batman. But I could see him being a scientist. If he had dreams, I just think that he would have the dream. I actually think that what you would see, and tell me this, if this would be bad or whatnot. I think that a lot of his dreams, you'd actually see that he'd want better things for other people. I think that he would, one of them could be that he wished John didn't end up being aged. Or he would wish that, the idea that if he wishes that Batman, Bruce Wayne, still had his parents, in that wish, you're almost maybe saying that you'll never be born, but I think he would take that. I think that he would wish for, Jason Todd, him and Jason Todd get angry or whatever. But I also think that maybe he would dream, like hope that him and Tim Drake could be closer. Or he dreams that when he became Robin, that he did it a little different, that he didn't ostracize everybody and things like that. I think that he would also wish straight up that Talia and Bruce were married and that they were together and they were a regular family that would just have regular things to go on. And then at the end of the dream, he'd probably realize that that wouldn't suit him anyway and that it would go. And that's where I think the big play of the dreams would be, is that Damien would dream a lot of things and then at the end kind of shove it off, almost like a wink, fourth wall breaking kind of thing of saying, that I wouldn't go for that anyway. But then you'd think, yeah, you would. I mean, one of the things, he's a manga writer. That would be him with Flatline, him with, all this stuff. Maybe not want to kill, what's her name? Her dad at the beginning, or that he's just there with Goliath. There's so many things that he would want. Yeah, I mean, Dungeon Crawler Carl said, I think that he would love to be a veterinarian. I think that that would be something that he'd really enjoy. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's the thing. And common sense is saying that's the thing that you ended up where Damien ended up, he was so angry. And of course, he's going to be angry at the Robin before him, and he's angry at this and that. And it's really good. He always loved Dick Grayson, though. And even when after Damien died, Dick Grayson found a tusk of the character Tusk, because it was a weird story and it didn't really work well in continuity. But you ended up, and I think it was Tomasi, because I did talk to him about it, and he's like, oh man, I messed it up a bit with Tusk. But you ended up where Damien knew that one of the biggest regrets that Dick Grayson had was not taking Tusk out. So after he died, he got in the mail a tusk, and it was Damien like, yeah, I took care of him for you. It was pretty dark, but it was really, really good. Yeah, Batcow was good too. And then, yeah, it's all that stuff. And JK said he did pick the Never Been Born to make Bruce happy was in Murder by Joey Esposito. Yeah. I mean, these are the things that Damien would dream of. But Tom King said he didn't have dreams, making him a complete and utter psychopath. And really framing in the idea of what everybody thinks is bad about Damien is that he's cold and he doesn't have feelings and he doesn't care. That's the thing. He cares probably more. And that's what it's heartbreaking about, how he does. And again, they set up the character perfectly. He's small and that angers him. He's got little big man syndrome, and he's mad at that, and the whole play. Speaking of which, two things that Bendis did that was completely ridiculous. He completely messed up where Damien and John comes back and then says, "Now I'm taller than you." And yeah, no, he always was. That was the thing. That's why Damien would get mad. Also, had Damien straight up eating meat, which he's a vegetarian, and that's bullshit too. Even though there was that line in Philip Kennedy Johnson, you can make it work, but it didn't feel right, where Batman's like, "We can get tacos and burgers." I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, you just proven that you don't hang out with your son. But it's kind of cool. But the one thing, though, too, is what I think Philip Kennedy Johnson does. If you've read a bunch of stuff with Batman, whenever Jason Todd, he gets such crap from Batman. But whenever Batman does finally say, "Okay, buddy," they always seem to eat burgers. And I swear to God, in my mind, the picture of it is the Batmobile, they're sitting on the hood of the Batmobile looking at Gotham from a hill, eating burgers. It's happened like 7 times, I think. But you end up, yeah. Chris Kent is, people were talking about the whole play of that being what they would play with and stuff like that. But yeah, so you have Chris Kent, but then you get Laura Zod and things like that, and you have weird things going on. But yeah, and JK says King doesn't bother to get to know the characters he writes. No. They're there to serve his purpose of a story that he's already thought up, usually. He's there and he's like, the phone rings. He's like, "Man, I'm just in the middle of watching True Grit. Who could this be? Oh, DC, you want me to write Supergirl?" Okay, back to True Grit. Now he has his notepad out. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do this. I hate when you get the idea where Tom King should be one of the big, we don't think he should be, but he is one of the bigger writers. And every time he talks, he's assigned character. Hey, and they come to him, and he's become the deal. When he talked about him getting Supergirl, he didn't have a story. He didn't go to them. They said, "We wanted somebody to write Supergirl angry and badass," so they called Tom King and True Grit. But yeah. So Lane said he just had a Whopper for lunch, so burgers sound good. What you just did is now convince me that I should go get a burger, because I would have thought Burger King would not be open. So I will go. I was vegetarian for years, and I kind of got away from that more recently than not. But I just kind of had a burger the one day and then had another, and I gotta start working out. That's what I have to do. But yeah, a bunch of things. But I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna end up I don't know, going to have fun on Easter Sunday with nobody. Maybe I'll just make something. I have to see. I don't even think I have a car here. I think my son Rafe went to his girlfriend's for Easter, so I think he's there. Now, she only lives like 3 blocks away, so he had to drive. But because I say went to his girlfriend's as if like it's like a college thing where you go home to your girlfriend's house or boyfriend's house. It's just down the line. But he'll have the keys. It won't be there. He would have driven the car there for them to go somewhere else. The car will be there with no keys. So I would end up not being able to go. But I could, I guess. I don't know if I need to. I don't think I'll walk to go get a Whopper. I think I'll just make something. But, make something in a house where all I have is a air fryer and a microwave, because they took the stove, the sink, everything is. I should take a picture and put it up like here on YouTube. It's just gutted. Everything is gutted except my room. That's it. So they're doing that. But yeah, happy 420. Happy Easter. Happy all of that. Thanks, everybody. I was actually convinced that nobody would show for this, but I had some fun talking. We got our grievances out, as you would during the second Festivus of the year, Easter. But yeah, I hope that me and Yule are on the aficionados sometime soon, because I do enjoy Yule, and even if I'm not, I do watch when Yule's on. And then you have Lane said, if I can, Jim, invite you this afternoon to hop into chat. I will be talking live some 1/6 scale figures on 6. I might, maybe, though. Again, you say that tonight at 7, I have the best of, so I get screwed. Too many shows. I forgot about that. Actually, Lane, thank you. Because I actually forgot. I keep forgetting it's Sunday and it's Easter. I'm such an idiot. But I'm going to get out of here. I would normally play my Dirty Easter song, but I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think I even have any song set up. I'll look for something. I usually end with Gray's theme, so I probably will end up doing that. I could do the one that I always play, or I could do the K-pop version of that. But I'm gonna get out of here with something. I'm just gonna go standard issue, maybe. Yeah, I'll do that. So thanks, everybody. I hope you had some fun. Talk some comics. I'll be back next week with Sully to be a little more focused, probably, or maybe not. Sully makes me go all over the place, too, with his nonsense. So we will see. But thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you all later.
感動して感謝しました。本当に大好きです。私は普通の男ではありません。私はもう本性の愛です。私にからかわないでください。そうしないとあなたは消えてしまいます。私は普通の男です。でも私はあなたを殺します。だからそのまま受け取ってください。足元に注意した方がいいよ。準備をしてください。フォローしないと大変なことになりますよ。私に伝わ